Yeah, sure. If you can invite them, that would be great, Ada. I just sent the email, the reminder email, not email actually, from here on Teams. I invited the people who registered here. So I think I have sent the request to join the meeting to everyone. But if you know anyone else who is interested, just feel free to invite them or like ask them to join the meeting right now. Okay, so just to save the time, I think we can start and then maybe someone else also can join us later. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another event from U Waterloo IT chapter. This is actually the first alumni talk that we have, and we started with Ben Allen, the former students of Professor Hellinga. So I just wanted to say hi to everyone and thank you for joining the meeting. So hopefully you can enjoy the event. And just now I want to hand over the session to Lucas, our treasurer at U Waterloo IT chapter, to like take care of the event and also introduce briefly maybe Ben. Yep, thanks. Go ahead.
Thanks, Reza. Hi, guys. Thanks again, Ben, for accepting to giving us this talk. So let me provide a little bit of an introduction of Ben. He has an undergrad in planning in the University of Waterloo. It was 2019, right, Ben?
Yeah, that's right.
And then you started your master's also in University of Waterloo, like in the research group of Professor Hellinger. And he finished in 2021. So unfortunately, we spent very little time together, like I guess just one term. It was in the middle of the pandemic itself as well. So we had very limited contact. But yeah, but I know that Ben did great things in his research. So let's hear a little bit about it. And after your master's, Ben started working at Parsons in Ottawa. So I think it is a good opportunity for us to listen to someone who has the experience in both academic and the professional life in the transportation. So it's very useful and helpful for students as well. So please go ahead, Ben. The floor is yours.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks a lot, Lucas. I'll share my screen here. Is that coming up? Looks okay.
Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, thanks for Lucas or to Lucas for inviting me. I didn't know I'd be the first one, but I'm hopefully I can do a good job and set everyone up for some more talks in the future. Yeah, as Lucas said, I'm an alumni of Waterloo. Actually, I guess a two degree alumni. And yeah, hopefully I'm going to go through this, I guess, presentation, talking a little bit about my experience both in undergrad and in my master's, go over my thesis a little bit, and then talk about some of my current experience. Hopefully it doesn't sound too much like I'm just rattling off my resume here, but I'll try to keep it interesting, keep everyone engaged on this Friday afternoon. So yeah. Yeah, starting off with my undergrad, as Lucas mentioned, I actually did my undergrad degree in planning at Waterloo in the School of Urban and Regional Planning. Graduated in 2019. Here's a picture of little baby me in one of our planning workshops there over in the environment building. Early on, I was pretty interested in transportation. I tried to be transportation focused. Unfortunately, there are kind of limited course offerings related to that through planning, but I took what I could. As well, had kind of a GIS focus through a lot of my degree, really trying to branch into the more analytical side of planning as much as that exists. So in terms of my co-op terms, first and second ones was as a student planner at York Region Transit, where I was managing and analyzing ridership data mostly, as well as participating in a lot of public information sessions. Here's us camped out at a mall in Vaughan in front of La Vie en Rose, which I thought was pretty funny. Then the next one, I guess my third, I did my co-op at third co-op at HDR Inc. in Richmond Hill, doing a variety of transportation-related projects around the GTA, environmental assessment studies for road widenings, some GIS work for the original Toronto downtown relief line, the precursor to the Ontario line. It was around this time that I kind of realized that a lot of my coworkers, a lot of the people doing this stuff that I wanted to be doing, had some kind of engineering degree. They were planners in name, but not necessarily planners in educational background. So as I'll get to, that kind of informed where I ended up going. Then for my final co-op term, I did something a little different. I went to Stats Canada to work as an urban data analyst in their, at the time, newly formed geomatics research section, doing some early work on what was called the Urban Data Centers Initiative, which I'm actually not sure if that still exists, but my research still exists somewhere on the Stats Canada website. I was doing research, geomatics research related to, for instance, public transit access and actually cannabis store access as well. This was right before legalization, which I also thought was pretty funny. Yeah, so like I said, I realized through some of my co-op work experience that maybe a planning degree wasn't going to get me exactly where I wanted in terms of career. So I got into contact with Dr. Halinga and figured out how I could possibly bridge that gap between planning and engineering a little bit. And I'm grateful to say that he was able to help me do that and start my master's in transportation planning in his research group in the Department of Civil Environmental Engineering. I think this is I'm definitely not it's a little less common, but I'm definitely not the first person to have done this. So I think yeah, more and more people are acknowledging the interrelationship between planning, land use planning, and transportation, and how those go hand in hand. So yeah, I'm going to give a brief little rundown of my thesis. It was not a course-based master's. It was a research-based master's. I won't get into too much detail because honestly, it's been so long I don't remember all of it. So, but I'm gonna try to give the spark notes, and then if there's some more questions at the end, definitely feel free to ask, or even feel free to request a copy of my thesis. I'd be happy to share. Yeah, the topic of my thesis was on estimating intersection annual average daily bicycle traffic from 8-hour turning movement counts. Something I'm very interested in is active transportation planning. I do quite a lot of biking, walking, and transit use here in Ottawa, which is good for all three of those, despite what you might hear about our LRT system. But so some background on this topic in terms of the practical needs behind it. Just like there is for car traffic, there's a need to measure average demand in terms of cyclists and express that demand in some standardized and unified metrics. With the increasing popularity of cyclists in our urban areas comes increasing infrastructure needs and increased data needs. But unfortunately, continuous traffic data is expensive, and active transportation departments at most Canadian cities have very small budgets. So there is a need. Despite that need, it's kind of hard to get that data, whereas short-term counts are much cheaper, but can be unreliable expressions of average activity, especially in cycling data, which is so seasonally dependent and fluctuates. The relative fluctuation in cycling traffic can be immense. So it's a very difficult to it's kind of a difficult proposition to get yearly averages for cycling traffic from one-day counts because the variation is so high. So that's what I set out to research was different methods for accomplishing this. There is kind of actually increasing body of research around this topic, acknowledging the need for more complete cycling data to support good planning decisions. So some background, some additional kind of contextual information in terms of different types of data that can be used for cyclist counts. There's what you think of as conventional cyclist counts, which are usually permanent counters installed at high volume locations. In the picture on the left there, I think that's Sussex Drive in Ottawa, where there's a high quality bidirectional cycling facility, which gets quite a lot of use. So it makes sense to install some kind of infrared or pneumatic counting device there, which is run on a permanent basis. Then there is video monitoring unit data. This is data continuously collected by cameras, pole-mounted cameras at intersections that measures separately car, vehicle, pedestrian, heavy vehicle, all types of different aggregations of data, of traffic data. And this is actually the data that I used for the thesis, was this video monitoring unit data. Some people may know the firm MyoVision. They collect or provide VMU data, which is actually where I got my data. And then finally, there is turning movement count data, which if any of you have done a co-term as I did at a engineering firm, you were probably sent out into the field to sit at a corner for 8 hours and count every vehicle that went by. But that's the kind of data that through this thesis, I was trying to explore the possibility of using that data, which is already being collected by jurisdictions all across North America, using that data to get more accurate expressions of average cyclist demand. So like I said, most jurisdictions are already collecting this, and they're collecting it for both vehicle traffic. They're collecting it for vehicle traffic, but at the same time counting cyclists. And the question is how we can take those short-term, usually 8-hour counts, and factor them up into accurate expressions of average annual demand for cyclists. Again, I'm not going to get too much into the weeds of the process here, but one of the challenges here was to use the VMU data, which is technically permanent data, is continuous count data, and using it to simulate the process of TMC, 8-hour TMC collection. So what that ended up looking like was this kind of iterative one-out calibration process that, again, I'm not going to get too much into, but on the screen, you can see the estimation, an overview of the estimation process, and the 2 steps that I kind of focused on most in my research were step 3 and step 4. Step 3 is kind of challenging and kind of interesting in that, so intuitively it makes sense that if you are taking permanent count data from a number of locations and using it to calibrate some kind of model for estimating cyclist demand, then you would want to group those locations with other like locations that have similar traffic profiles. So to exemplify this, say you have a short-term count from a location where there's very low weekend or weekday volume and very high weekend volume. So it's like a recreational cycling path that gets most of its volume on the weekend. Unfortunately, it's very hard to know that is true from just one 8-hour count. You usually need more continuous data to be able to make that kind of determination, but you are not always going to have more continuous data. So part of the challenge is determining that traffic profile from without having a continuous set of data. So part of what I did was try to evaluate some possible physical land use characteristics of count locations that would explain some temporal variation in cycling counts. And I'll get into some of the conclusions in a second, but using sort of stuff like the proximity of commercial uses or the proximity of a school or the whether it was on-road or off-road, characteristics such as that. And theoretically, some of those should explain the relative variation in cyclist counts. And while it might not be good enough to predict directly the volume of cyclists, it is good enough to establish or group locations by like characteristics under the assumption that they would have similar traffic profiles for the purposes of demand estimation. So yeah, then the other thing, and again, I keep saying this, but I won't get too much into the details, was the ADB estimation. I proposed a method of factor-based estimation. And some of the results are summarized here. You'll see that it's fairly difficult to get accurate estimates of annual average daily bicycle traffic, especially for the data that I was using was from a city. It was from Tucson, Arizona, Pima County, where there are not very many cyclists. It's so the most of the counts are very low, and when you're using such low counts, the relative error for even just a small, say a location has sees 10 cyclists a day, if your estimate is off by even just 2, then that's a 20% error. That's it. So it's the error results are a little bit inflated, but comparable actually to some of the literature in terms of what other people were able to accomplish. So that's something at least. Some key findings. Again, I was able to propose a method for estimating ADB, this metric, annual average daily bicycle traffic, which is suitable for using 1-day 8-hour turning movement counts. And the kind of key message here is that the method I proposed could be used to estimate average demand at any intersection for which you have, for which a TMC is available, assuming that you are also collecting permanent count data at other locations that you can use to calibrate this factoring model. Yeah, as I was saying, I evaluated the method using this data set and showed that it was at least as accurate, if not slightly more accurate than other existing methods. And then I also evaluated the possibility of determining cyclists or relative cyclist volume patterns using physical land use characteristics. And while that ended up being fairly difficult, I actually wasn't able to show that doing this resulted in significantly more accurate estimates than just grouping all locations into a single factor group. I think it was still kind of a worthwhile exercise. So yeah, that's actually the end of what I had about my thesis. I successfully defended it in the fall of 2021, and I think Lucas was there to see it. I've got to say so. Yeah, like I said, if anyone is interested in that or wants to learn more about that, I'm happy to provide the document. And that brings us to now. Right after I defended the thesis, actually even before I defended the thesis, I had started doing some part-time work at the Ottawa office of Parsons Corporation. Parsons is kind of a multidisciplinary engineering company that has a much larger footprint in the States, but here in Ottawa, we're doing a lot of kind of transportation-related and infrastructure-related projects, which I'm lucky to be able to be working for them now. Some of the work I'm doing now a lot of it includes environmental assessments for things such as road widenings. Here there is a 2-lane road in a suburban arterial in Canada. If you've ever been to Ottawa, I wouldn't recommend going to Canada, but it's there, which they are considering widening from 2 to 4 lanes. And so we are doing a holistic environmental assessment, which involves a lot of evaluation of the environmental components and impacts of the project, as well as a great deal of public consultation and some functional design or geometric design, like you're seeing on the screen, which I was able to have a hand in kind of all of those processes. So it's good to have. It's good to be able to be involved in so many facets of these large projects. Hopefully, we actually are wrapping this study up fairly soon. I'm in the process of writing the environmental study report, which will have to be approved at some point by the province. Yeah, some other less structured or smaller projects include road reimaginings. And again, this goes back to kind of the marriage of my two interests in both in planning and in transportation planning / engineering. So here are two examples of these kind of broad planning studies that we did that involved, first of all, traffic assessments to see. So in most of these cases, we're looking at what are now 4 or 6 lanes roads, and we're seeing what can we do to improve both the public realm and the function of these roads. So we're starting off with traffic studies to see what the road can accommodate in the future, and we're going through kind of high-level evaluation of different options for reimagining the streetscape, reimagining the cross section, and seeing what we can fit within the existing right-of-way. Actually, interestingly, something the city of Ottawa is really good at now is that under their new official plan, all urban roads, all arterial and collector roads are considered cycling routes and are to be upgraded to have cycling facilities. That's whenever possible, basically. So I think that's pretty cool, and it means a lot of work for us in terms of evaluating the feasibility of roads across the region accommodating high order cycling facilities. Some other projects, some of which are pretty contentious and are not done, so I won't get into too many details, but you may know that the Ottawa Hospital is developing a massive new campus close to Dow's Lake, and I have been involved in some of the traffic monitoring strategies, transportation demand management and monitoring strategies for the planning application for this project. As well, at the moment, we are doing a traffic study related to the Wellington Street closure. So Wellington Street is the street that goes right in front of Parliament, and it was closed for certain reasons for an extended period of time last year. And we are now undergoing this transportation assessment to see whether it could be closed on a permanent basis and turned into a more holistic public realm. Semi-related to that, doing a transportation assessment of if you've ever been to Ottawa, the Rideau Sussex Node. This is one of the most high-profile intersections in the city. Right in the picture there, you can see this is the Senate building on the right, the Chateau Laurier on the left, the Rideau Center at the top, but right now, it's a very hostile public environment because of the arrangement of the large roads feeding into this node. So we're undergoing an assessment to see how we can reconfigure that space and to improve the overall human scale of that area. So I think that's pretty neat as well. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it for what I had to talk about, but yeah, welcome any questions.
Great, Ben. Thank you very much for the very informative presentation. So we had some questions. We received some questions from the forms, from the registration forms. So I believe you can start with those ones, and then we can open to the people who is here.
Sure.
So Clarence sent a question. What do you feel that are the key values of your planning and engineering degree experience in relation to your current role? And would you advocate for a joint degree? A very good question.
Yeah, so I kind of touched on it, but there is an increasing acknowledgement of the way that land use planning and transportation planning are kind of one and the same and need to be done in lockstep. So yeah, my undergraduate experience and my graduate experience really valuable in different ways. My planning degree helped me with kind of the big picture thinking, visioning and writing and explaining. And a lot of my job is public consultation as well, like messaging in terms of expressing our goals for the transportation network to the public. And then, and although I got some of this in my undergraduate degree, the master's degree really helped with some of the analytical elements of what I think is. I think there is not always, but maybe more room for kind of data-driven decision making, as always the case in every field. But yeah, really being able to use more analytical skills to support the broader visions from the planning side of things. Yeah, I in my master's degree, I used a level of calculus which I had not used in many years beforehand. So yeah, it was good to get that kind of refresher. But yeah, and then now in my current role, I work equally actually with the planning department and with the traffic department. So I am doing both some of those broader, I don't want to call them soft skills exactly, but some of the broader planning exercises, but then also diving into some of the more detailed traffic exercises, which I think it's valuable to be able to be applying those different skill sets kind of in parallel. Yeah.
Nice.
And would I advocate for a joint degree? Yeah, I definitely would. Yeah.
Would you? Nice. Just as a follow-up, do you use any software like engineering software or?
Yeah, absolutely. Synchro and Vism are both useful ones to learn, which I remember having used them quite a bit in my master's. So any of those modeling and traffic softwares are well used. Let's see. Well, Microsoft Office, you got to know PowerPoint. No, I can't think of any other specific ones.
But in your job, do you apply any specific?
Yes, yeah, absolutely, yeah. So yeah, I do use some synchro GIS. Actually, I do a lot of GIS work now, and through my co-op terms, I used GIS quite a bit. But yeah.
Nice, thank you. So we have a couple of questions that are the same topic, so I'm gonna present them both now. So Safana asked, "How can I start my career?" And Melinda, who is here, I guess, asked, what opportunities are available for planners to get into the field of transportation engineering? Do you have any tips? Do you have for networking in the field, something like that? So do you have any suggestions regarding this first step for finding a job in the field?
Yeah, I mean, that's a hard question. I think, yeah, I got quite lucky just with the timing of coming out of school and being looking, and I just applied, and hit on an interview with with Parsons for actually that they didn't really have a position, but they didn't have a position in mind, but they liked kind of what I was just talking about. They thought it was interesting, at least, that I had both a planning and an engineering degree, so I was able to get an interview. No, so in that sense, I'm kind of a bad person to ask for tips, because I got quite lucky, which maybe that's all there is to it. But yeah, I guess persistence is good, and yeah, having your supervisor, if you have one, is a really excellent resource for networking and being introduced to people who might at some point link you with someone who might link you with someone who could have some employment for you. So yeah.
Yep, I agree. So the last question here is a bit philosophical, maybe. It's
Sure.
from Joe. The question is, what's the future of transportation planning? I mean, do you see any, like, in your company, there is any vision or any kind of mission that is being kind of new, that is changing over time, like focusing on the active transportation, stuff like that?
Well, I think that is a really big one, and that definitely stems from the municipal priorities. So in Ottawa, especially, Ottawa is really doubling down on like TOD, like transit-oriented development, and active transportation planning, and all these kind of very contemporary planning ideas, and reversing some of the car-oriented dependence that's been developed over the past half a century. So I think that is yeah, really a big one in terms of where transportation is going. I don't, there's kind of a lot to do about tech and tech's role in the transportation future. And I think maybe at one day that will be true. Like maybe there will be autonomous taxis driving you everywhere you want to go. But I think what I can say is that because transportation is a matter of municipal governance, and municipal governance moves quite slowly, I don't know if that's where we're headed. I don't know if that's where we're headed quite yet. I think it'll be a long time before that kind of utopian transportation future comes into effect. I think for now it's a lot of the small stuff. It's it's creating human scaled transportation facilities, and like I said, kind of refocusing our priorities away from the automobile would be, I would say, where things are headed. Yeah.
Great, Ben. So we have a question in the chat from Adriana. So she is asking, what are some transit planning major differences you observed between Ottawa and Waterloo? Excellent question.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I've touched on it a couple of times, but Ottawa, despite being very slow moving, is pretty forward thinking on a lot of these planning issues. I think it helps that we're so far away from everybody else in Ontario in a weird way. Feels very isolated from the GTA and the influence of the GTA and kind of the car culture that exists there. But I actually don't. I think kind of the same could be said for Waterloo. Wasn't Waterloo Region maybe the smallest municipality in North America to have rail transit when ION opened in whatever year that was? So I think both municipalities are really striving for kind of to meet this new not new, but renewed paradigm in terms of progressive transportation planning. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, go ahead, Ida.
Hi, Ben.
Hi.
Hi. Thank you so much for your presentation. So, I have questions regarding three aspects. So, firstly, when you talk about the method you use to collect data and make models, I wonder how do you come up with that model, and how do you know that model really works, that measures what your intent is intended to be? And the second question, do you want me to ask them all or later?
No, sure. Go ahead. Yeah, ask
Okay.
both. I can try.
So the second question is regarding co-op jobs actually.
Yeah.
So I'm actually doing a co-op with OC Transpo now, but I see that you can do data analysis, you can do environmental EA studies in your co-op, but what I do at OC is mostly collect raw data and then draw diagrams. So I don't even know how I can market this experience in my next interview. So how did you convince them to give you more technical jobs at your co-op? And
Sure.
then
Yeah.
third question.
Oh no, sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah. And third question is, I really wonder how you transit from like planning to engineering, because when I emailed the admission committee, they said there's no way I can do it because I don't have the prerequisite. So how did you do that?
I'm going to answer your questions in reverse order so I can remember them better. But first, it might be kind of a bespoke solution, but I had to take undergraduate civil engineering courses and achieve a certain grade in those courses to get my degree. So that was on top of the other graduate level courses that I was taking. But yeah, there was I think I took like Professor Bachman's modeling course, undergraduate modeling course, a couple of other undergraduate level courses to make up for some of that knowledge gap. Yeah, also, yeah, getting in contact directly with Dr. Holinga and getting an interview about my priorities and my interests and my envisioned career direction really helped a lot, I think. So yeah, it's a hard question because I don't know. I have kind of what you might call like survivor's bias. Like I managed it, so I don't know exactly specifically what about my situation made it so that I was able to do it, but that ended up being how it was structured, was that I had to take some undergraduate courses. Yeah.
Do you still remember which courses you took?
Yes, I took oh boy. I think it was the second year like introductory transportation planning course where you learn about pavement structures and all that. I do not remember the course code. And then I took Professor Bachman's, excuse me, modeling course, which was very difficult. So yeah, I think those might have been the only two. Yeah. And then for your second question was about co-op terms. So yeah, actually, so like you saw, my first co-op term was actually my first two were with York Region Transit, and I guess what I would say is that your co-op experience is really building it upon itself, and you maybe don't learn everything that you're going to do in your next co-op term in your first co-op term, but what you can do is demonstrate a proclivity or an interest in those things that you will be doing. Like yeah, I guess like yeah, again, kind of a hard question, but yeah, I think yeah, I think you just need to, it should be thought of as very not linear necessarily, but yeah, you might not be learning everything that you need for the next co-op term from your first co-op term, but because you are going to be learning those things in your next co-op term, and just really showing your interest in those topics and in that field through your first co-op term goes a long way towards making that next step that you would like to, or that you envision getting. Yeah. Sorry, I'm not sure. I hope that was an okay answer, but yeah, and then your third question was about the modeling. So the model that I did was actually, the answer is you read a lot of previous work. You look at the literature and get kind of you build upon what's been done in the literature. So the model that I did for estimating ADB was based on what other people have done to estimate cyclist demand, which in turn is based on what other people have done to estimate vehicle demand. So yeah, that's kind of where, I guess, again, it's a process that built, academics is a process that built upon itself in that way. How I tested the model was, I think I might have briefly touched on this, but I used a continuous set of data to simulate the process of collecting short-term data. So basically what I did is that I had a set of data from 20 different locations, and one by one I removed locations to act as like test locations to stand in for a location where you had 8-hour data counts, and then use the rest of the locations as permanent count locations to calibrate the model. And then one by one, I iteratively performed the estimation process for each of those locations, acting as if it was the short-term count location. So I know that there's a word for that process that I'm now blanking on, or a term for that process, but that was how I verified it. Maybe Lucas or Rosa know the term I'm referencing? No, okay, that's okay.
That's similar to a cross validation, something
That's
like that.
basically it. Yeah. Yeah. So did that kind of did that answer? Hopefully partially answer some of your questions.
Yeah, give me a good idea.
Okay, thank you.
So any other questions, guys? I have a question.
Sure.
A lot of students have curiosity regarding the professional life. So could you like explain how is a typical day of work for you? Like what do you do and what activities like?
Sure. Yeah. Well, it was weird for a while because when I started, it was obviously still the pandemic, and they were encouraging me to go into the office because as a new employee, they wanted me to, it's good to get that interaction with other employees, but I was the only one. So yeah, I wasn't getting any interaction with other employees. It was just me in an empty office. So I stopped doing that for a while. I was just working from home, but now we're back to 3-day. I go in Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. I'm on a pretty typical 8:30 to 5 schedule. Something that you may encounter or may have already encountered, which I find to be kind of a pain, but which I think is important, is that in the private sector, I am charging all of my time to specific projects. I have to fill out a timesheet every Thursday. So you got to keep very close track of how much time you're spending on every project, so you can charge the time accordingly. Yeah, I think, yeah, like I said, the work life it's obviously very different with the pandemic, but it's kind of returning to some semblance of pre-pandemic normalcy. The office is filling up, and I'm commuting in a crowd of other other people on the Ottawa LRT every morning. So yeah, I don't know anything specific. You want to know?
That's
okay.
fine.
Okay.
So any other questions, guys? Or should we wrap up? Yes, we're done. So, Reza, do you have any?
Yeah, actually, I have a question in my mind, but I'm not sure if relevant to the today's topic or not. But just I'm going to ask if you don't mind. Actually, I was thinking in terms of engineering. I mean, from the engineering side, for example, myself already working on road safety topics. And then when we want to analyze any locations in terms of safety level, then again, we need to back to the planning to see what was the land use, what was the demand, and so on. So always I was thinking that why those stuffs are not getting take care during the planning side. Maybe you can provide like some examples, because I was talking with some other friends in the planning side, and they said that for completing a planning, they are not taking care of safety level. They're just taking care of, for example, the demand and then the distribution of the demand and so on. But do you have any idea why safety is not getting like too many, specifically analysis during planning as well? Or I'm not sure, even maybe there is like some planning that doing based on the safety as well.
Yeah. So I guess what I'll say is that maybe that's one of the ways that transportation planning is changing, is that what is safe, what is considered safe is changing, and the way that safety is viewed is changing a little bit. And I will say that in the like formalized planning process, road planning process, like safety is very much baked in, I guess. Just sometimes in the past, there have been mistakes, and I guess, and even now mistakes are made. But for instance, so I brought up the example of that road widening I'm doing, the suburban road widening I've been working on. And as part of the approvals process, it's subject to a road safety audit. So even at just this like preliminary functional design level, the road is subject to a detailed road safety audit from a third party consultant. I think, like in theory, that should result in a high level of safety. I guess just there are probably examples where a mistake was made somewhere along the way, or something was missed that resulted in that safety deficiency you might be referring to. And I also think that contemporary design and contemporary planning is much better at that. I mean, here in Ottawa, there you can see 50 different examples of older arterial roads that would never in a million years pass. There'd be a checklist of items in that road safety audit, like hydro poles in the street on a 4-lane, 50-kilometer-an-hour arterial. All kinds of different things, and hindsight is 2020, but probably at the time that those roads were designed, either priorities were different, or cars were smaller, or whatever number of factors, something was missed in that process. But I will say that in the formalized planning process, it's very much a requirement to demonstrate safety of whatever road you're designing. Yeah.
Oh, that's perfect. I didn't know that. Always I was thinking that planning is just considering like the demand and those stuffs. But just as a follow-up question, you were talking about audit, the safety audit for the roads that you are going to plan. I'm just curious to know if there is any like simulation process to, for example, before building that road, just simulate in the software like Synchro or Visim, and then extract, for example, the interaction and the conflict between the cars to figure out how much would be the safety level in future for that design. These are the things that are also going to be considered during the planning or not?
Well, so a lot of it is kind of based on pre-existing standards. So TAC road design standards. Like I don't know, like for this example of the EA study that I'm doing, I don't know if, I think maybe 1 or 2 intersections we've modeled in Vism, but it wasn't necessary. It was more for an intersection performance performance than it was for safety purposes. So a lot, yeah, I think a lot of that, where that those road safety thresholds and standards come from is from, yeah, existing standards. And yeah, you're right, a lot of that I guess is kind of more more planning and like traffic planning than it is well, it's kind of what you're describing. Yeah.
Perfect. Thanks for the
no problem.
great explanation.
So thanks, Ben. It was excellent. Thank you very
No
much
problem.
for
My
having
pleasure.
this talk, and it was very informative. And I guess we could share a lot of you could share a lot of your experience both academically and professionally. Go ahead, Mattia.
Yes, hello. I was just wondering if there's any way that if any of the students or speakers wanted to get in touch with you after the presentation. I know before we would have speakers share their LinkedIn or something like that. Do you mind, or do you have any way for students to do that if they have any further questions? Or yeah, what is your preference?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, I'm not. I'm unfortunately, maybe they don't have LinkedIn, but I can definitely share my email with Lucas to distribute to anyone who's interested. I would totally be open to receiving questions or inquiries or anything. So yeah, I think email would be the way to go.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. So thanks, Ben. Thanks again.
No problem. My pleasure.
Hope to see you in Waterloo someday, maybe.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank
Thank
you.
everyone. Bye bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Ben.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.